Welcome. My name is Damien Cole and with me is Amy Ramirez, and we are reference librarians in the Reader's Services branch here at the National Library of Australia. And we're here to talk to you about using the library's collections to research the history of a place, the local history of a place, what we have in the collections and how to go about using and accessing it. I'll just turn the camera off now so we can actually get into the presentation. As a quick overview of what we'll talk through today, we'll show you the variety of materials available across the library collections that can be used to find the history of a place or a location, a town, a city, a suburb or a region. Some of this may be predictable if you've used the library before, particularly if you've already done some research of your own history of your place already, but some I hope may be surprising and enlightening. We'll go through how to find items in the collection with some guidance on catalogue searching, how to use the library collections both at home and here in the library reading rooms. One thing to say is that we'll not be specifically looking at family history. Family history is of course bound up in the history of a place, the history of people living in that place. And it may be that people are your primary interest of your research. There are a whole range of resources for family history research, and indeed it's probably the biggest single use of the library's collections, but it is quite specialised and can be complex. The sorts of methods and materials we'll be talking about will be a way to get to the stories of families and people by getting to the story of their place, where and how they lived. We offer several separate learning program webinars like this, focusing on family history, so I suggest you have a look at the library's YouTube channel and learning program calendar for more. The key place to start is where your place of interest is. For me, being Canberra born and bred, this is my local place here, and so the place that I've researched and am familiar with. We will use some examples of different resources we have on local history, but only as an example of the sort of resources we have at the library and online. For your place, the range of materials and how to find and use them will be much the same. Just insert the name of your place that you want to find the history of, instead of whatever name we may be referring to as an example. We will have varying materials on different places, maybe more or maybe less, but to start searching is the way to find out. We want to show you, with various places as examples, the range of likely materials and resources we have on the history of a place, to find the story of a place, and that then can be your place to search for. The library has a collection of more than just books. The collection includes imagery, music, spoken words, objects, digital resources, and more on all manner of subjects. And through this presentation, we'll show you the range of what the library has, how to use it, and an idea of what sort of local stories you can find in this. So to the materials in our collections, starting with the printed collections. The first and obvious, books are the core of the library collections, as you would expect. The library has some 6 million books in the collection and continues to collect current publications from Australia under the legal deposit scheme that requires any book published in Australia to be deposited in the library. These include ongoing publications such as journals, periodicals, magazines and newspapers. And these are increasingly being collected in a digital format. For what we collect today, some 30% of single title books and 70% of regularly published periodicals are in a digital format. The books are probably the best place to start researching the history of a place. These include things such as histories and general works, biographies, government publications and heritage reports, family histories or books on the lives of significant personalities in a place, publications by local historical societies, including their journals and newsletters, and books on community groups and commercial businesses. They include publications contemporary to the events of the past, written by those who actually lived through that history, and transient publications that are rich source for local history, such as phone and business directories, the white and yellow pages. And also even consider fiction books set in the place that give you an idea of how it was to live in that place at that time. But as any good librarian would say, libraries are more than just books. The National Library has a large collection of many varied formats, information presented in all forms. If there's one thing I'd really like to take away from this presentation, it is the National Library, and indeed any library, is more than just books. These different formats can be used to find different and unexpected stories or present different sides to the one story, and we want to take you through these different formats. The Manuscripts collection contains the unpublished and the personal, diaries, journals, letters, notebooks, and literary drafts. We aim to collect papers and records of individuals and organisations that reflect the diversity of Australian society, culture, and environments. It includes papers of people from ordinary settlers and workers to government and city officials, writers, and other creatives, and records of organisations such as community groups, social clubs, business and enthusiast groups. Manuscripts can tell the personal story by those who lived it. Manuscript collections can be small, maybe just one folder of documents, or very large, perhaps hundreds of boxes. The largest personal collection we hold is the papers of Sir Robert Menzies, over 500 boxes covering his life and career. The archival nature of manuscripts, personal and unpublished, can make using manuscripts challenging. So just be ready to spend a bit of time on them, but I'm sure it will be worth it. All manuscript collections are catalogued, but the details within them are often not. Large collections have finding aids, sort of like a listing of the contents of the boxes. Many finding aids are viewable online, linked from the catalogue record for that collection. Others are in paper format and available here in the library's reading rooms. But if not viewable online, you can always ask us to email a copy of a finding aid to you. Do ask for assistance in using manuscript collections. There are issues such as access conditions and copyright and fragile materials may complicate things, but they are probably one of our best used and I think most useful collections. Some examples of the sort of spread of things in manuscripts. It includes the papers of the personal, such as a collection of 15 letters written by Thomas Hampton to his brother during his travels around the Victorian goldfields in the 1850s, 60s and 70s. They tell of life on the goldfields and methods of mining and farming, and of his success or lack of it, the extremes of weather and other things he experienced from around Maryborough, Ararat and Carisbrook. He says the general state of the colony is prosperous with plenty of gold getting, but he also believed that wine production would soon become an important thing for the region, and so a great insight into one person's view of their place. There are also papers of the professional, such as the records of Burnema and Bibb and Luke stations. Nearly 40 boxes of papers covering the operations of these two pastoral stations in the Monero region of southern New South Wales from 1888 to 1915. The collection includes letter books, financial records, diaries, station ledgers and business correspondence. While they may seem dry financial records, they tell the story of business and life on the land in a way that was so common at the turn of the 20th century Australia, written by those who lived there and worked the stations. And also in a wonderful way to combine it, the papers of both the professional and the everyday, such as the papers of Charles Studdy Daly. With a 40-year career in government, Daly was one of the most significant public servants in the early development of Canberra and as a capital city. He was also a keen musician in his personal time. This collection shows how the personal likes of a professional of research interest can start their own stories. Amongst documents and letters on the development of the Canberra site as the capital and pamphlets on town planning are records that Daly created and collected on the Canberra Musical Society, of which he was president for 20 years. Things such as meeting minutes, member files, concert programs and reviews. This tells the story of how inhabitants of Canberra lived and played in the growing city, the social life of the city, and this can be a central part of the life of that place. Taking the Daly collection as an example can show family history can be explored through the local history and through a manuscripts collection. In the Musical Society member files are the names of some of my family living in Canberra in the 1930s and 40s. The Daly collection is not in itself a likely family history resource, and I have no relation to Charles Daly myself, but I find part of my family in the collection, and can imagine my family living in Canberra, going to concerts, enjoying the music, and it seems on at least one occasion being late with their membership dues. This can show that a local history and then a family history can appear in a resource you may not first think of looking in. The papers of the person will tell the story of their life and of where they lived, and so who else lived there. So do think broadly for your local history research, not just in the obvious resources you may think of first. I'll now hand over to Amy to continue talking through our collections.
Thank you, Damien. So pictures are a handy resource when researching the history of a place. Our pictures collection holds around 1 million photographs and artworks, which document aspects of Australian life, society, personalities, and events. Examples include portraits of individuals, images of landscapes and structures, political cartoons, and imagery of everyday life. So I guess this poses the question, why do we collect these items, and how does our collecting differ from that of an art gallery? Our collection of pictures is for their documentary value and not about aesthetics or artistic value. We do collect images from prominent artists, of course, but most of our collection is based on ordinary individuals documenting their own life experiences and surroundings. We also collect contemporary photographs that document today's places, events, and people, and this is done in a variety of ways, whether by commission or donation. A large portion of the pictures collection is digitised and viewable online, and those that aren't can be viewed here at the library in our special collections reading room. So relevant to today's discussion, pictures assist us by giving an image to a story. They show the place you are researching as it was and how it has developed. So I'm going to take you through a few examples of the types of imagery we have in our collection. So a key purpose of the pictures collection is to document a changing landscape over time, to show how a place has grown and changed. So we have a wide range of photographs of locations, scenes, and buildings from around the country. And one of these wider ranging formed collections in the library is the Ledger collection. It contains around 421 photographs, which includes album prints from various photographers and, of course, his own work. The photos were taken between 1858 and 1910 in Victoria, New South Wales, Tasmania, and South Australia. Ledger was a town planning consultant who eventually became a lecturer in town and regional planning. He made extensive use of the photographs to show how Australian cities and towns have changed. Most of the photographs in the collection are of public buildings and streets in cities and towns, such as the Royal Engineers Office, but there are also natural landscapes depicted in the collection, such as Lavender Bay here in Sydney Harbour. Definitely not how it looks today, but it's just an example of how these places have changed over time. So local photographers. Local photographers are important as they create a large bank of photographs documenting a specific place. So one of these examples is the Mandurama collection, which is a collection of over 3,000 photographs of people and daily life around Mandurama and the central New South Wales region at the start of the 20th century. These photographs were captured by Ivan Antoni Liu and possibly his wife Rose. Many of the figures that are depicted in the collection remain unidentified, but also this collection is an invaluable source for seeing parts of Australia during the Victorian and post-Federation eras, with few of these types of collections of this size surviving to this day. Another collection I'll mention is the Jeff Carter collection. So Jeff Carter was a freelance photographer and journalist who was self-proclaimed as the photographer of the poor and the unknown. There are over 600 photographs in this collection, with most of the photos being of individuals who had recorded oral history interviews with him. There are photographs of sceneries in cities and regional towns in most of the states and territories, and Jeff is widely regarded as one of Australia's most influential documentary photographers, as his span of photographs has created a significant visual record of Australia life. So artworks, while allowing a more imaginative expression of place, are also helpful for understanding us, or for helping us understand, picture how it once was. This could be especially helpful for places that no longer exist at this current time. So Glenegg Hotel and the Flagstaff by John Michael Skipper. So John Michael Skipper was an artist and also a solicitor. He was known for having a natural skill and painted various scenes in South Australia and the goldfields in Victoria. His sketches and paintings of built and natural environments have been credited as holding great artistic and historical value. But I also wanted to bring your attention to an artwork that links to the Thomas Hampton letters Damien mentioned before. This sketch is of the Mount Alexander goldfields, and while this isn't an area that is connected to Hampton's story, it reflects on how we can use multiple formats to tell us the same story. So doing a comparative analysis of different formats allows us to understand the same place in different ways. So connecting a written description of a past time to a more visual description of place. And of course, our national collection is just that, a national documentation of the varied lives of our nation's people. So our collection of portraits and documentation of events across the country must try to reflect this diversity. Alongside oral history interviews, which I'll be talking about in a few moments, we also have a collection of individual portraits from those who have been interviewed. So Bob Gebhardt is one of these individuals. Gebhardt recalls his life as a drover and his early days in Broken Hill in New South Wales. He speaks about his relationships with his Aboriginal and Afghan mates and co-workers and his work as a master welder of international standing. Portraits of individuals can connect us to place through the people they are depicting, such as understanding prominent industries in the area. But our collection also holds photographs of events in the life of a place, from the ceremonial to the everyday. One of the photos I have depicted here is a group of people in a semi-formal attire at an event in Newcastle. So the picture reflects a few things. This picture is part of a newspaper photographs archive, the Newcastle Morning Herald and the Miners Advocate Archive. So it depicts the importance of these archives in telling everyday stories. And another thing that I want to point out is many of our photos, such as this one, are of unknown subjects. So many subjects in our collection remain unidentified. We're constantly searching to improve our descriptions of collection material. So if you can establish who they are or where they are in these photographs, definitely get in contact with us and we can improve our descriptions. And that in turn will assist future researchers and would be immensely valuable. Okay, so moving on to maps, and a collection that I feel has the most to say about local places and history. So our maps collection in total includes around 1 million maps, which includes different types of highlighting topographic surveys, land ownership, design and development, road and tourist maps, and also mapping from the air. The range of maps we hold spans from European maps and their assumption of a great southern landmass, up to the satellite and digital data sets that are being produced today. So maps gives us a complete picture of the layout of a landscape and how people have lived on the land. They give a sense of place to a story and give us a physical way to show that place. So many of our maps in our collection are fully digitized online and can be downloaded from Trove. So the different maps we'll be talking about are all covered in more depth in our online research guides as well. So if you're finding you're having difficulties finding relevant maps in our collection or just want to understand them a bit better, then they are an excellent resource to go to. A well-known and key resource for understanding local history and family history are land ownership maps, typically referred to as cadastral or parish maps. These are considered a strength of the library's map collection, mostly due to the amount of parish maps we hold, but coverage and dates do vary between different states. Recently, the library has undergone a project which aims to digitise these cadastral and parish maps. Thousands of maps from New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland have been digitised and placed online. And these states also run by a similar system, so they're separated by counties and then subdivided into parishes. So for the ACT, South Australia, Western Australia, Tasmania and Northern Territory, they all have varying systems that they use. This is especially the case for South Australia, Northern Territory and WA, as not all of the states are separated into counties, parishes or hundreds, with this separating kind of concentrated to the higher populated areas. Wikipedia has some handy pages which talks through how land was divided across Australia and the differing systems each state and territory used. If you're also looking for more detailed deposited plans of towns and suburbs, These can be found through the relevant land registry department of your state and territory. For example, in New South Wales, that would be the Land Registry Services and their Historical Land Record Viewer, which is online. So land sales plans. So these are posters advertising blocks of land or sites for sale for a variety of reasons, whether it be commercial or personal. These can include sales that did occur or plans that didn't progress any further. So these posters can be used as early evidence for prices of blocks of land, its boundaries and past built environments, and any eventual changes to the roads or land usages. The National Library holds around 100,000 land sales plans in their collection. Most of our collection records the auctions of Eastern Australia from around the 1840s to the 1930s. And I guess the most known function of maps, and one that should come to no surprise, is that maps highlight the physical landscape of the land as it once was and how it has changed. So topographic maps both highlight the natural and man-made environments of a place. So the library holds around 200,000 post-1990s Australian topographic maps, which have been published by both national and state mapping and surveying authorities. So I'm going to switch over to Trove just to highlight the differences between these two topographic maps. So one of them is the 1976 version, which is highlighted here, and the other is from 1989. So there's just over 10 years difference between the two. And that one as well. So I'll start with 1976. So as you can see, all the vineyards around here, there's quite a few of them. Still lots of grassy areas along here and a big pine plantation up the top. So not a lot of urban development going on. It's still quite a natural landscape. Now we jump over to 1989 and you can already see all these built up areas starting to form here where it once was grassy and a natural landscape. And very lightly you can see the size of some vineyards shrinking over on this side here. But another thing I will point out is that icons in maps do change over time. So while in the 1976 version, the pine plantations are noted with this very prominent dark green icon, that completely changes in the 1989 version where it's more of a light green. So it's pretty important to just bear in mind those differences that can occur in maps. So I'll just go back to the PowerPoint now and we'll move on to aerial photography. So the maps collection includes aerial photography conducted by the Commonwealth Government for surveying and planning purposes for the 1930s to the 1980s. All Australian states are represented in our collection, including Papua New Guinea and Antarctica, which amounts to around 800,000 photographs. The aerial photography is a perfect way to see the growth of the cities and towns and changes to the landscape. They were used by city planners and other professions such as environmental resource management, ecology, archaeology, and the military. Unfortunately, most of this collection is only viewable at the library, but flight diagrams are available online through geoscience, so you can figure out what series of aerial photographs will show the area you want. So a supporting resource that researchers find key in using maps are gazetteers. Think of it as like a geographical directory. These are often used in conjunction with maps because of the explicit written detail they go into about a specific place. Older gazetteers include information about its location through latitude and longitude, the geographical profile of the place, the main industries and commerce, the population count, and even things like how regular the post deliveries are. The origin of the locality's name is also an important bit of information that gets mentioned in these guides. But changing or variant place names can be a confusing thing when researching a place. So examples of some place name changes in the past include Darwin, which was once known as Palmerston. And many place names in South Australia were changed during World War I as they were of German origin. So I thought I'd also mention that the Bellairs New South Wales Gazetteer for 1866 is digitised online through Library of Congress. So that is also a handy guide to go to if you can't make it on site and view these in person. So moving on to oral history and folklore. Our oral history interviews document life stories from people across Australia with different and somewhat similar stories relating to our cultural, intellectual and social aspects of life. Our earliest interviews date back to the 1950s, but can discuss events decades before that. Our interviews can be a part of a project focusing around a unified theme, or they can be singular. Oral histories are a detailed oral picture of a place through reminiscence, and can also be a chance to hear about details of places that are underrepresented in the historical record. So many of our interviews are available to listen to online and have written transcripts. As these collections could hold sensitive information, they might also have access conditions, so you will need to contact us if that is the case. Some might be available for access by getting written permission, but some might not be accessible for the interviewee's lifetime. So I just wanted to point out really quickly a few of the prominent collections. So Wendy Lowenstein's 1930s Depression collection. So this collection comprises of 172 tapes of recollections of life during the Depression in the 1930s. And these were recorded by Lowenstein in 1972 to 1976. And around 68 of these interviews are available online. The interviewees all lived in all the states and included bagmen, shearers, station hands, cane cutters, builders, plumbers, a whole range of occupations. And some of the examples of specific place descriptions relate to land prices during the Depression, the rising popularity of places due to low rents, and the origins of particular stores in townships. And I'll also point out the Drover's Oral History Project. So this is a collection of around 140 interviews, with around 25 of them available online. And most interviewees lived in Queensland, and recordings were made in Charters Towers, Mount Isa, Cloncurry, Emerald, Mackay, Bundaberg, and there were also other recordings made in Alice Springs, Adelaide and Canberra. So onto newspapers. Newspapers are an effective form of detailing local history as they discuss stories at the time they are happening. Local newspapers are an important source of information on any town or city as they document events that occurred in that place, as well as people that lived there. The National Library's collection holds the major daily newspapers, as well as regional, local and community newspapers. So most Australian newspapers pre-1955 are digitised on Trove. After this, it can get tricky as to whether you can find newspapers online or if they can be only be viewed on site at a library. For newspapers not on Trove and for post-1955 papers, these are most likely on microfilm and print. Microfilm is the preferred method for viewing these papers as they are more robust than the typical newspaper. For newspapers around the 1990s onwards, newspapers can be accessed through our subscribed online databases such as NewsBank and the Australia-New Zealand Reference Centre. These can be accessed at home by logging in with your library card, but this will be discussed in a few moments by Damien. The National Library has presented other learning programs focusing on newspapers, which will provide more in-depth information. This section was just to give you a brief overview of how newspapers document local history and a brief overview on the different ways you can access newspapers in our collection. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Damien, who's going to discuss a few more of our collections and how you can go about finding them. Thank you, Damien.
And so to our music collections. As well as reading and listening to history, you can also sing to it. The library has a collection of printed sheet musical scores, some 300,000 in all range of musical styles. Music and lyrics can tell so much of the story of a place. Music served as a form of advertisement, Music served as a form of advertisement, a celebration, or describing an event or local personality. A song about a place can really show what people thought about that place, or what that place wanted people to think about it. Many songs about Canberra in the early 20th century seem to be trying to convince Australians to accept the new city as their capital. So perhaps a little bit of that Canberra cringe that all of us Canberrans perhaps still feel today. Many of the older musical scores are digitised and can be seen online. To ephemera. Now, ephemera is a term given to printed materials that were intended to be short-term or immediate use. They are ephemeral, seen as minor things to inform for a moment. But we have collected and kept them, as they are largely the everyday documents of people's lives. They tell the stories of these passing events. The Ephemera Collection includes advertising material, postcards, posters, trade catalogues, performance programs, tourist and travel guides, and scrapbooks. All these can tell the story of a place and the people living in it, as they are the material produced by a local group or about a local event. Not all items are individually catalogued, but they do have subject area catalogue records and descriptive lists that can be seen through our website. They are often grouped by who produced them or under very broad subject headings. So this is, in a way, a bit like manuscripts. A bit of searching may be needed to find what you're looking for, or just something unexpected that is informative. And again, many ephemera items are digitised and viewable online, but not always the entire contents of a collection. Ephemera can be based around an event in the calendar of a place, such as a festival or formal dinner of a social group, or be advertising for a place, such as here, the El Dorado Motel, the first motel in Surfers Paradise. We are currently collecting ephemera around the COVID-19 pandemic to document the day-to-day experiences of Australians living through this event, as this event that we are living through now will become part of our history that researchers in the future will turn to a library to find out more about. And so to websites. A new resource launched by the library just last year is the Australian Web Archive. The AWA archives.au domain name websites from 1996 onwards. This covers government, commercial and personal websites. It's basically a snapshot of each page within a website as it existed at that time. The AWA is accessible via Trove, and so searches of Trove will include the AWA in results. Websites can be a source of historical information that has already been compiled and published online. Older versions of existing websites can be seen, as well as websites that may no longer be active. And just like collecting books that have been published, the library now aims to collect websites that have been published online. The new way to tell old stories or to document the history of a place from now into the future. While all websites can be searched for, there are groupings of selected websites by theme, including one on local history. For example, there are 35 different websites created for the 2013 centenary of Canberra that have been archived to tell a story about how Canberra celebrated our local history, and as well as a collection of some 41 websites devoted to exploring and describing historical villages around Australia. So while that was a quick overview of the variety of materials in the collection that can be used to research the local history of a place, there are many other ways to find that information online. I want to go to our website to show you some of these online resources that can be accessed through us and used for researching local history. So I'll click through to our National Library homepage. So on our library homepage, one thing to look at is research guides. We publish a number of research guides online to aid in researching particular subjects and parts of the library collection. You can see this through using the library and under our research and tools and resources, research guides. Listed by various subjects, these research guides list useful resources, provide guidance on using the catalogue and collections, and show what resources exist beyond the library. They are a very good first step to researching almost any topic. Guides that are relevant to local history include guides to Australian cemetery records, guides to topographic maps and maps of family historians, and many guides on family history research and the use of birth, death, and marriage records. I go back to our home page to another option, to blogs. Through our stories and into blogs. Staff and researchers produce blogs that are another source of information on what is in the collections, the stories that can be told, and how to use the library collections. New blogs are regularly published in all aspects of the library collection and how to use the library. And two, probably one of our most used resources, and certainly if you're not able to come visit us in Canberra, the most important one perhaps, is our eResources. So I click through from eResources to take you into our eResources portal. What we refer to as our eResources are subscription websites containing online journals, databases, newspapers, and ebooks. If you're logging into our eResources, you need to accept terms and conditions. But things such as Australian online journals and other publications on history and society can all be relevant to researching local histories. The first thing to do if you are trying to get into our resources is to log in with your National Library card. And I'll talk a bit about that shortly. But once you've logged in with that card, it opens up the content of a lot of things you can see online. Search for content within a database perhaps, but the best way to perhaps start is to browse the resources that we have. A list of the sorts of resources we offer, but also the basic subjects as a way if you want to get started. There are three basic categories of eResources to be aware of, and having a look at these little icons that appear before each one of them. Free websites that are basically a freely available website that we just link to because it's particularly useful or perhaps hard to find. Licensed eResources, these are ones that you can log into from home with your library card. So just look for the one that has the small little key icon. But also a lot of on-site resources with the little National Library of Australia building icon are ones that can only be accessed here in the library building. But you can see even from this starting list, there's quite a variety there. So from home, always look for these little key icons. These are things you can access from home. So in order to how to find things, in talking through the various resources we use, the question of course you always have next is how to find things. So from our library homepage here, our catalogue is just under the top banner. So click on Catalogue. The online catalogue is the first and best place to begin. It's basically the database of what is in the library collections. I'll try and give a very basic overview of using the catalogue with some search tips. Given how much there is you may want to find and the number of different ways to find the same thing, it's a bit hard to give a complete "this is all you need to know" type description. So the best advice I can give is to explore the catalogue. Don't assume you'll find the perfect item straight away. The more you look, the more you'll find, and so be patient. There are many different ways to search for things in our catalogue. Perhaps the first, if you know a particular book that you want to find, is just to search for the book title. I'll have a search for one that I've used a lot for my own local place history. And in knowing the title, you just type in the title name and click find. It'll then bring up a list of results that match that search, but the first one is the book that I was after, Canberra Following Griffin, which is a really good history of the early development of Canberra. On a catalogue record such as this, there's already some things you can start to explore further with. Looking at these subject headings will effectively be links to groups of items on that same subject. So even if you find just one item that you think is going to be useful, that's the way to then look at the subject headings it has to find what else is on that same subject. So again, if you get stuck, just finding one item of use is really the best way to get into things. Another simple way to search is by keyword, which is probably the broadest way to search. So I'll have another go at that as an example. The simplest way is just the place name that you're interested in and history. This is going to get a lot of different results, but there are ways to narrow things down into things that are more useful for you. If you get too much to begin with, you can use things such as these narrow search options to select just a particular format within that great range of things that we've been talking about. You can also just want to have a look at things that are online and easy to see rather than print materials. Or again, those subject headings to see in this large result, what are the related subjects. And by clicking on these, you'll get into those little small groups of items that may be a bit easier to comprehend. And you can also arrange your search results in different ways. The date, oldest, newest is probably the best, particularly if you're looking at things such as historical books. But you can also break up what you're looking at by date as well. So don't be put off by perhaps getting too many things in the first result. There are all sorts of different ways that you can then break down that large list of items so things may be a little bit more specific for you. So these are examples of where we've digitized the map, the book, the oral history recording that you may be looking at. Things that are viewable online will have this icon on the left to click on, and that will then take you into the actual digitized view of the book, where you can effectively then read the book as it were in front of you. That's it. To search for general works about the history of a place, a good way to use is the browse function. You can't browse the books yourself in the library collection, but you can browse lists of books of how we've catalogued them. So I'm going to the browse alphabetically option, select that you want to browse subjects, and then type in a subject. And for local histories, the best format to follow is the place name, the state, and history. So there you can see how it's already starting to bring up that browse option. By clicking on the top one, you'll see this kind of arranged list of subject headings. And by clicking on one of them, you'll get to the actual records of the books that match that heading. So always try that simple format of place name, state, and history as the best way to get started. In searching for a place name, if the first result doesn't get too much, then think about searching a bit broader for that same area. Such as, think about searching for the region rather than the actual place name itself. You may find that there are items that are a little bit broadly discovered rather than just under that one location. Or think of a nearby place name or a shire name or the next neighbouring town as other ways to get to perhaps material about the particular place that you want to have a look at. But this basic structure is the one to use: the place name, the state as an abbreviation, and history as a subject to look for. You can also search for personal names, such as a significant individual or your own family member, perhaps, or family name. And also look for property names, if we can try one that we've had a look at before. And that's actually the item that I showed you, some of those station books, and you can see other things related to that station name we're looking for. While history is perhaps the best subject to be looking for from the start, there are all sorts of other subject headings that may be useful for finding out about the history of a place. Things such as city planning, description and travel, genealogy, and social life. So through that same basic structure of place name and state. So using that same structure of place name, state, and a subject, something like social life and customs will bring up another grouping of things that may be useful to find out about the history of that place. But some basic advice in using the catalogue is to be patient, be persistent, think laterally if the first result you get doesn't get something that you want. And if you find one thing that doesn't match what you want, explore further from there through those subject headings. There is a help page on the catalogue with tips for using the catalogue and also various how-to videos that can be used to actually show you how to search through our catalogue. So I'll just get back to our presentation. The key thing in actually using the library's resources is to have a National Library card. While you don't need a card to search our online catalogue or to view digitised collection items, the card is used to log into our eResources to see that online content. And if you come to the library building in Canberra, use to request and view items here in the library building. To get a library card, apply online through our website to get a library card, and we will then post the card out to you. So once you find what you want, what now? If you're not in Canberra to visit the library building, there are still several ways to access our collection. As we've said, through each of these formats, many items are digitised and can be seen online through our catalogue, almost 6 million images, and we are still digitising more all the time. From home, the library card can be used to access the eResources online journals, ebooks, and newspapers online. And while you can't exactly borrow books yourself from our collection, we can loan many of our books to other libraries through the Interlibrary loan service. If you find something we have in our collection, go to your local public library and ask if they can request an interlibrary loan, and the book may be able to be sent there for you to use. You can also use our paid copying service called Copies Direct. Using this, you can order copies of items in our collection as digital scans or paper photocopies. There may be some limits on what can be copied and how you can use it because of copyright, access conditions on manuscripts and oral histories, and sometimes items may be just too fragile to copy. But submit an order for what you want, and our copying staff will check all of this and let you know what is possible. And of course, there is always Trove. As I'm hoping many of you may have already used this, Trove is like an online discovery service that combines the online catalogues of libraries, archives, museums and galleries across Australia. It will show you which collecting institution has a particular item. So if you find something in our collection you like, search Trove, and you may be able to find another library closer to you that has the same thing. And in looking beyond just the library, for local history, you should also be trying your state library, state archives, and a local public library of the place you're looking at. These will have many things that we ourselves may not have in our collection. And also, a local historical society is a great resource to try. These are great sources of local information, but as they often have very limited resources or are staffed by volunteers, they may not have as much of an online presence as other sources. If you're able to visit Canberra and come to the library building to use the collection here, we do operate a little differently to most libraries you may have been to. Our collection is not all on shelves in a room where you can just browse along yourself. With 11 million items, there are just too many to have in one room to let you wander around. So our collection is kept in what we call closed stacks. Material needs to be requested by you for us to bring it from these closed stacks to you to use. You'll need a library card for this to log into our online catalogue and submit requests for what you want to see. And we then deliver that requested material to a reading room for you to use. Library cards can also be used to pay for photocopying and printing in the reading rooms. So you have a taste there of the range of materials of library collections on the subject of local history in a range of different formats and different ways to present information and stories. We hope you can see how beyond just the books, there are many other formats to search and use when researching the local history of a place and to find the story of that place. How to use the catalogue, how to use the reading rooms and access the collection from home, and what our services are. For any queries on using the library, such as searching for material, how to research a subject, how to get copies or permissions, how to access something you have found, you can submit an online inquiry form or a phone call through our Ask a Librarian service, and this is available from our homepage. We can't do all your research for you, but we can guide you on your search and explain how to use our collections. We are here to help you on your research to find the history of your place and the stories that that place can have. The library that we have here is full of such stories to uncover, and thank you from both of us.